guys, welcome back to another episode of Hey Bub Outdoors. Hey Bub.
That's very good.
Can you give me a hey Bub?
Sure. Hi, Bob.
It was hot. It was a hot hey Bub. And speaking of hot, it hasn't been hot here in Southern Illinois. We're in the middle of April. We had snow yesterday, Matt. What are you guys looking at like out there in PA?
We didn't get any snow here where we are, but just north of us they did. And yeah, cold weather. It was like a 25-degree temperature swing over a period of like 3 hours yesterday during the day. We had hail. My poor dog was outside while I was on a conference call and came back. I went down to get her out. She was covered in maple tree flowers and had like hail in her fur. I felt terrible.
Ooh.
So yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
it's
cold.
I had one of our guests, TK, turkey killer Clint Young, over in Southern Illinois here yesterday, and he filled his out-of-state Illinois tag. It was really fun, but it was like 31 degrees when we got out. It had snowed the night before. There was some snow, a little bit of snow still left on the ground, but it didn't stop the turkeys. The turkeys were hammering yesterday morning, and I think he killed his within 10 minutes of the beginning of legal shooting line. I think it was like 5:50 or something like that when he killed his bird. So
Didn't waste any time at all.
did not waste any time at all. Had a great morning. But we are going to be diving in. So it's about the middle of April, and we're going to be diving into an important topic today. And Matt's done a little bit of research to introduce some ideas to us. And again, we're on this learning journey. And so everything we kind of glean from what's happening on the outside, and we want to kind of help inform and gather information from people a lot smarter than us. And Matt's kind of located some pretty interesting articles, and one in particular that we're going to dive in today. So we're going to be talking about the 17-year Brood 10, not Brood X, as I referred to it earlier, Brood 10 cicadas. And the hatches this year for almost all of Indiana, and actually where we're at in Illinois, we are right on the Wabash River. And this is going to be, after looking at the chart, this is going to be kind of an overlap area. So my guess is we're going to get a little bit of Brood 10, 17-year cicada, but Indiana. And actually, it's kind of interesting, Matt. There are a few states here in between Indiana and you, all the way out there in PA, that are having Brood 10, but you guys, you're kind of right in the heart of it out there. So
it's weird because it kind of goes Southern Illinois is about as far west as it goes, I believe. And then through Indiana, like you said, depending on what map you look at, there's parts of Kentucky and Tennessee that are part of it, West Virginia, get some, Ohio, but Western Pennsylvania doesn't actually encounter Brood 10, which is interesting. It's Eastern PA that gets most of it. We're kind of on the fringe as well. So I'm interested to see how much we get out here. This is the first time I've lived in Pennsylvania with one of the brood hatches. So
yeah.
And just so we can kind of get it out there, cicadas, there are annual cicadas, which are slightly larger than what you're going to see from like a big brood hatch. They look a little bit different. The ones that come in there's actually a 13-year brood hatch, which I think there's a handful of those. And then there's about, I think 13 or 15 other brood hatches that are every 17 years. So,
and a cicada, Matt, can you describe what a cicada is? We're talking about.
Yeah, so a cicada, it's an insect. Growing up, I think we called them locusts, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
But some people call them locusts, but they're cicada. They have real buggy eyes. They're typically the ones you're going to see every year. I think they're about 3 inches long. They're a pretty big bug, and they have like these translucent wings. But they look hideous, and you'll find they actually have like these little shells that they'll leave on the tree. So if you see this little brown thing that's split open in the back, it looks like an alien shed its skin, and just like it's got claws that grips onto the tree. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
But you'll see a ton of them during a brood hatch year, which for probably a lot of our listeners is this year coming up here in middle of May. So things are about to get real interesting.
They are. So
Yeah.
the cicada actually crawls out of the ground, like those trees where you see the shells hanging onto. You'll look down on the ground and you'll see holes in the dirt,
Hmm.
and they bore holes up through the dirt
Hmm.
next to the tree, which is kind of where the eggs were laid 17 years earlier, right? Where kind of the offspring fell off of the tree, went down into the ground, and it's been hanging out for 17 years.
Yeah, essentially. So my understanding from the somewhat limited research that I've done, but it's super interesting. I encourage you guys to just Google cicada brood hatch um, articles, and you'll find some information there that's pretty interesting. Basically, the way I understand it is that they actually feed on the root system of a tree or a large shrub or something like that. But they get their nutrients while they're in the ground from the trees. And so, yeah, every 17 years, I'm not exactly sure what exactly it is, that internal clock. I
It's
have
amazing.
a feeling it's a divine intervention
Yeah,
that
it's amazing.
allows them to have that clock. But essentially, they come out 17 years once the ground temperature reaches about 64 degrees, is what they say, around 64 degrees. That kind of triggers the great ascent out of the ground, and yeah, they start flying around. They are pretty decent at flying, but they're noisy. You'll hear that like sound, especially at night. The annual ones, they make a lot of their noise at night, whereas the ones that come out during the brood hatch, 17, 13 years, they're going to be noisier during the day, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that.
Wow.
But they basically make their way up a tree. Um, they feed on the tree or whatever plant a little bit more while they're out of the ground, and then they end up laying their eggs. So the whole process takes about 3 to 4 weeks, and by then the eggs hatch, and they make their way back into the ground, and it just starts over the long process again. But it's
That's
pretty
amazing.
interesting the way that I read they survive, which is really, I think, a cool. Uh, it teaches you how many there are that emerge from the ground. They completely satiate all of the predators. So you're talking about birds, uh, squirrels, raccoons, possums, basically anything will eat a cicada. Turkeys. Um, they have a huge net that they cast as far as what will actually feast on a cicada. And so they completely satiate their predators, which means basically the predators don't want another bite. Like they're so full from eating cicadas all the time because there's so many of them. Um, and yet the predators only eat a very small percentage of the cicadas that actually hatch and come out of the ground. So it's really, really interesting. And that's how they survive. Like they just come in such great numbers that the
Ah,
predators can't keep up. And so they continue their process and do the same thing again 17 or 13 years later. But,
that's amazing. 17 years ago, Matt, Lauren and I got married.
wow, that's
And
hard to believe. It's been
yeah,
17
yeah,
years.
2004.
Yeah.
And, we planned the wedding like a year and a half out in advance. And, and we figured out, about 6 months into the process, oh no, next year's the 17-year cicadas.
Yeah.
And we had visions, and we had an outdoor reception. We had
Yeah.
visions of cicadas getting caught in the lady's hair, and everybody being miserable because of these insects. But we got married June 26th, and by then they were gone. So
Yeah.
that 4-week process does start at least here in southern Indiana, southern Illinois, about right around the beginning to middle of May.
Mm-hmm.
And for 4 weeks, man, it is. I mean, you drive down the road and you just hear them bouncing off your car. I mean, there's just, it's crazy how they seem to just take over in a matter of days. All of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
like you're living in a different world almost.
Yeah.
And it's crazy.
Yeah. They just come alive.
Yeah.
I remember, I think I've only, see, I guess I've only been alive for one of them. So this will be my second one. And I just remember the first time around, like I've never experienced anything like this. And for those of you that have been like in an area that's had a brood hatch, you'll know and remember likely the amount that they just coming in droves. Like right now out in Pennsylvania, we have an invasive bug called the spotted lanternfly, and they're everywhere. And it's the cicada brood hatch was probably 3 or 4 times as much.
Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty intense, but it's really cool the impact that they have on wildlife. So there's an article done by UC Berkeley, or a study done by UC Berkeley on cicada hatches and how it affects different bird species. And they basically, what they did is they had different observation points, I think around 40 observation points, and they would go every year and observe certain species of birds. And they had a list of like 25 different species. And what they discovered was during a brood year, or brood hatch, I should say, a cicada brood hatch, the year of that brood hatch, and for some species, 2 to 4 years after the species had, that specific species of bird had a very large increase in population numbers and survivability rate. Like they just had, it has a massive effect. And they're saying, one, it's a good food source for the birds, so they're not going to starve, because we live in a time where there is a lack of habitat and food for a lot of bird species.
Right.
But they also completely fill the bellies, like I said, of the predators.
Right.
So all these birds that would have been prey
from like predators like raccoons, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like think of a turkey poult. Like they would be a prime example, because they are typically preyed upon in those months, because it all happens kind of at the same time.
Right.
Whereas turkey poults are, those are just beginning days and weeks for a turkey poult. Okay, well now we have cicadas that'll feed the raccoons and keep them alive, and it's an alternative food source for a lot of the predators.
And it's easy and it's available everywhere.
It's very plentiful.
Right.
So it's really, really interesting. They said about half of the bird species that they studied, they noticed a significant increase in population, which I thought was really, really cool. I didn't really think about like raccoons and squirrels eating them, but they several articles I read mentioned mammals as well. I was like, oh, it makes sense. I just thought mostly of birds.
You also sent an article from the Purdue University Extension Office that was actually written just last week, I think on the 15th. And man, it had a lot, and it applied the cicada hatch specifically to wild turkeys, and fascinating information. And both these articles we'll have linked in the description below, so you can kind of search through that. But man, it sounds like, the cicada hatch has most certainly been tied to a healthy turkey population and some really extensive research through the years. And so, even measuring, I saw one chart measuring like the number of gobbles on roadside listening spikes,
like tripled or quadrupled
the year following turkey hatches. So pretty fascinating stuff.
Cicada hatch.
What'd I say?
You said turkey hatch.
Oh, cicada hatches.
But
yeah. So really, really fascinating. Anything else that stood out to you from either of those articles, Matt, about kind of how those cicadas, kind of misdirect, it takes the attention off the prey species and gives them kind of a relief here. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing. It's almost like God's designed everything with these cicadas. He's designed like almost like a year of jubilee for some, what I mean? For some of these species that just get hammered every single year. I'm wondering even like if bobcats are going to be eating on these, because there's been an increase of cats all through this area at least. And, some people are wondering if that's going to be related to, decline in the turkey population. But if some of these predators can eat even for just a year on something other than, these typical prey species, that gives them a chance to kind of rebound and also nourish themselves. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, there was a question that was raised. I don't think they had very good evidence one way or the other about whether or not, because the predators also had so much food. I mean, obviously it benefits them in a significant way as well. So if that would have an adverse effect the following years on, like, we think of like a turkey, for example.
Right.
But it seemed like they're mostly saying, well, it has so much of a benefit for the species that are prey typically, that the predator species don't seem to have like a significant increase. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting. I mean, it's
pretty
kind of
cool.
like you can flip the coin on it and look at it from a different perspective as well. But it seemed like most of the evidence was pointing towards prey species being the ones that flourished from it. So, but one of the things too that is really awesome about cicada brood hatch years is fishing. And I think, Adam and I, we got to experience that the last time around. I think you had a story that you were going to
Oh
share
yeah.
fishing
So
wise. So
yeah, I remember going and of course they're everywhere. And I remember getting to like a little cricket cage, I think, and I was throwing them in this cricket cage. I was getting them off the trees and finding them and catching them. It was a little intimidating at first. You're thinking, man, are these things going to bite me or sting me? I mean,
yeah,
it kind of looked like a giant killer hornet,
yeah,
But
totally
actually,
harmless.
yeah, yeah.
Totally harmless.
I'll never forget in 2004, Matt and I we were helping our family work on a house, and we were building a house. And actually, this house was being built right beside a pond that had great fishing in it. But I remember our favorite way during the cicada hatch of 2004, our very favorite way to fish during that cicada hatch was, and I did this a number of times. I had a little ultralight, a little 4.5 foot ultralight, spinning reel. Oh, and I would get like a size 6 hook, and I would put that cicada on there. I had like 4 pound test line, and I wouldn't do a bobber. I wouldn't do a sinker. It was just a gold hook, and I'd hook it right through the tail, and the hook would come out the belly and face back towards the tail. And I would open the bail and I would just give it a little bit of a heave, and the cicada would take flight.
Yeah.
We did this all the time.
Yeah.
And actually that cicada could fly I mean, those things absolutely can fly. They can
Yeah.
get it. And,
Yeah.
and I would have the bail open, and with that ultralight line, the cicada would take flight across the pond. I would close the bail, give it one little jerk, and that would cause the cicada to hit the water, and it would just sit on top of the water and just buzz and just, I mean, fish. We caught bluegill, we caught bass, everything would hit those.
Yeah.
And I can't wait. I can't wait to do that with our kids this spring. It's going to be so much fun to see just how explosive the action is. So I'm really looking forward to fishing with cicadas.
Yeah. It's like it's a topwater bait that does all the work for you, because it has, I mean, if you're able to hook them, like you said, and keep them alive where they're going to move and twitch and all that stuff. I mean, they do all the work. All you have to do is just sit and wait and enjoy the show, because it is a topwater feeding frenzy. And a lot of fly fishermen out here in Pennsylvania are really excited, because apparently, like a lot of the veteran fly fishermen, they make flies that look like the cicada. So I don't know why you wouldn't just use your own, like just pop one on your hook, but like we used to do. But they say, just find an area that has like trees surrounding the water, because they're going to drop out of the trees into the water, and find those honey holes and just be a part of it. Basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
they say they even bring like catfish up from the bottom. Like a catfish will come to the top, a carp will come to the top, fish that normally stay at the bottom of a body of water, because they're just that good to eat for the fish. They love them. So,
yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So we're just kind of scratching the surface on this topic of specifically the brood 10, 17-year cicada that's hatching out here in just a couple of weeks, but it's going to be a game changer. I mean, there is a kind of a downside, like, I mean, some of the trees I planted 7 years ago, they might get knocked back some this year, but really, unless you have something that just isn't established, I can't see the 17-year cicada just destroying your tree. I mean, it might knock it back a little bit, but I have thought about going over some of my young trees that are in tree tubes and just putting a screen over them, while the 17-year cicada is here, just to keep them from getting harassed. I don't even know if I'll do that yet, but
Yeah.
I
think they do prefer larger diameter trees typically.
Right.
But yeah, that's probably a good idea just in case.
But the upside is really, really positive, and I think all of the bird species that typically just get picked on by these predators are they're gonna breathe a sigh of relief this year. So yeah. So mark this on your calendar. This is 2021, the year of the 17-year cicada, and just kind of journal. If you're not a wildlife journaler and you don't kind of keep track of what years are good or bad, a lot of the experienced old timers, they do that. And they'll actually go back. I have one friend that journals all of his hunting, which I think is just unbelievable.
Cool.
But he keeps track of his favorite years and his favorite days within those years of different species. But I think this would be a year to journal, and especially the next 2 years, just kind of seeing what kind of impact this has. And just being able to celebrate some of God's ways of putting rhythms in creation that nourish and provide. So
yeah,
pretty exciting things. Anything else you want to add, Matt?
I don't think so. I think one of the things that's difficult for some people to get past initially is like, hey, these are scary looking bugs and they're everywhere, and so just remember that they can't hurt you. And they're really good for practical jokes. I do remember the last time we had a brood hatch when I was still living in southern Indiana. My sister was terrified of them. And so anytime we were all outside together and we were walking under trees or anything like that, or by a tree, just grab a low hanging branch and give it a good shake, and they'll just erupt off of it. And that, if you would like to play a practical joke on someone, that's a good way to do it. So
yeah,
but don't tell them that I told you to do it.
2021, great year for turkeys of both human and fowl kind.
Exactly.
All right. Well, hey guys, thanks so much for joining us on another episode of Hey Bub Outdoors. Check back in with us. We'll be releasing content as things just continue to unfold this spring. So thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
See y'all later.
Peace out.
It's just pizza, okay?
All right, Bob.